What's going on, guys, and welcome to Who to Sign For. Now in this series I'm giving you my recommendations on what players to sign for a specific team in career mode, but before we go on I will say that the signings you'll see aren't designed to be realistic, which is very important, and that the player ratings and potentials may vary depending on what database you're using and how they perform for you during the season. You don't have to follow all the tips, this is really just a set of guidelines to give you a hand if you're stuck for ideas and want some suggestions on what players you could sign for a certain club. This is mainly aimed at those who are out there who may be new to the game and just want some help, or for those who are out there who may be stuck for ideas on what players you could sign for a certain team in career mode. So in today's episode of Who to Sign For, guys, we are going to take a look at the German side Hoffenheim. Yes, Hoffenheim from the Bundesliga, who last season finished in 4th place in Germany's top tier. It was their best finish ever, and it does qualify them for next season's Champions League. So next year they'll be playing in the Champions League, subject to a qualifier, I believe. But it's the first time they've gone to the Champions League in the club's history, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, 4th was their highest finish ever. And I'd imagine that Hoffenheim are probably going to be a team who many of you guys will want to do a career mode with next season, due to them being in Europe and most likely having a pretty decent budget next season. And I've also got a sneaky suspicion as well, their real stadium might be in the game next year as well. That's the Rhein-Neckar Arena. I've got a sneaky little suspicion they might have that real stadium in the game next year. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is a possibility. Mönchengladbach got theirs, Borussia Park, in FIFA 16 when they qualified for the Champions League, so it is a possibility. So watch out for that, and if they do have a real stadium, I'm sure many more of you guys want to try them out. But anyway, Hoffenheim's team then, as you can see, they start off with a £17.3 million budget. The objectives in the first season are to finish in mid-table and reach the round of 32 in the Deutsche Pokal, which they enter automatically, so that aim is already met, which is great. And it's a decent team as well. Now what you'll see by this squad is that there are quite a few players that are currently loaned out right now. Unlike in a lot of my Who to Sign For episodes, I don't recall anyone, as you'll see in a moment, but it's a pretty small squad, and it's a youthful squad as well. It is a really decent team, and I'd probably say I'll give more of a closing statement on this team as we come towards the end of the episode. But this is a really good base team to begin a fun career with. But again, it's a decent team. They play a 5-3-2 in the game, so 3 centre backs and 2 fullbacks / wing backs. Although some people, of course, do change the formations around. I tend to just use what the game gives me. But you might be tempted to play a 3-5-2 and have those wing backs playing as wide midfielders instead, for a little bit more of an attacking threat when going forward, particularly down at the flanks. Now they've got a few players with a contract coming at the end of the year. Sebastian Rudy, Kolak, Danilo, and someone else, Schwegler, who had the deals that come at the end of the year. I'd only give one contract, that's to Sebastian Rudy, who's currently in their team right now as a 79 rated central midfielder. I think he also grows one rating to an 80 as well, but he's a very decent midfielder, the best that Hoffenheim have, so just keep him here and give him at least another couple years on his contract. I gave him a 4-year deal, as I normally always do, but you can let the rest go. And again, a reminder there, I didn't recall anyone from loan, as no one is good enough to go back and play in the first 11 in the first season. Now, as for signings with Hoffenheim, you saw their team there, their squad, the layout I had for them. What areas would I look for with Hoffenheim? Well, I would go in for a new left back. Now, right now, they have Jeremy Toljan, who funnily enough plays for my St. Pauli side in my RTG career mode. They have Danilo and another one as well that plays left wing back and left midfield, but I would still suggest a new left back that has a lot more first team quality, and my number one target will be this guy right here, Alejandro Grimaldo from Benfica, 78 rated, 20 years old, who has 87 potential. This is one of the best young left backs you can buy in the game. He's already got some amazing stats. He's quick with high stamina already. Now it'll cost you a few million over his valuation, valued at £9.5 million. You can probably pick him up for around 12 to 14 million. I got him for 13 million, but this is definitely my number one choice in the left back role. And what you'll notice throughout this episode is what you've probably noticed in quite a few of my more recent Who to Sign For episodes, is that the players that I'm signing are on far lower wages than the players I'm selling. Players like Danilo, for example, were on more of an expensive salary compared to Grimaldo. Spoilers, when we signed Grimaldo in this episode for, again, £13 million, you'll see that right now he's on 9.4k a week, which is absolutely nothing. That's peanuts, that's pennies really, and we get him for 10 grand a week. Now Now, 10 grand a week on a 5-year deal for a 78 rated left back with 87 potential is just nothing other than an absolute bargain. So Grimaldo, certainly my number one target, not just for his potential, not just for his starting overall being better than the 3 left backs that are currently here at Hoffenheim right now when you start the game, but also for the fact that he's cheaper in terms of the salary than all of the 3 that are currently in the Hoffenheim team right now, as we sold Schwegler to Hamburg for £2.8 million, and also tried to sell Salah as well, a backup striker, but sadly he didn't want to relocate to Bastia, so in the end we just decided to keep him here. But yeah, Grimaldo cost us £13 million, and as you'll see, just 10 grand a week is all he wants, so just a £600 a week pay increase, which is again absolutely nothing. And on a 5-year deal, this guy is your starting left back for many years to come, and he will be throughout the entire career. With 87 potential, he's going to grow so nicely, and he does have a growth rating of 9 to get to that 87 potential, which is his peak. I have actually read though he doesn't grow quite well in the first season. Now I don't know if that's true or not. Well, you see the simulation how he does for me, but for some people they say he struggles to grow, if at all. Like some people say he doesn't grow in any ratings ever. But of course that does happen to you. You can just use a training feature and get his stats up that way. But yeah, just be warned that might happen to you. I didn't have the problem myself. He grew for me, but yeah, apparently some people say he doesn't grow in any stats at all, which I don't. Again, I don't know. It didn't happen in my save. It never happened to me when I signed him, but still. We also sold Polanski as well to Leverkusen for £4.2 million. Now that's of course one of the players in this team that is more of the senior members of the squad. And as you're noticing, this Hoffenheim team does not have many players to get sold in it. A few players leave the club, but really as a team, most of the side is quite youthful. So you don't really need to make major changes in the first season. A couple of signings, yes, but for the most part, your team is already pretty decent in the first season. And with very relaxed objectives of just finishing in mid-table and reaching around the 32 in the cup, you already meet the former objective automatically, and the first one is extremely easy. You don't need to change the whole dynamic of the squad and change it completely in the first year. You can take your time, and it's going to be a really easy natural progression and natural transition when you arrive at the Rhein-Neckar Arena. Now as for new signings though, after the sales of Polanski, after the sales of Schwegler, we did have a little bit more money left over to sign a new player. I went in for Yuri Tielemans of Anderlecht. I don't really need to talk about this guy in great length because I'm sure you've heard of him, but if you haven't, he is a young Belgian talent that's actually leaving Anderlecht in real life, but in the game still at Anderlecht. 19 years old, 79 rated, valued at £13.5 million, and of course one of the most obvious signings to make for any team. He's just so good with really good growth. His potential is 90, which is one of the highest for a young talent in the game, and he is certainly someone who you have to pick up. I mean, Tielemans is the type of guy that could play, be a good signing for any team. Like, he's got such great potential, being 90 and already 79 rated as well. Even if you're managing a big team, it'd still be very useful for you. But for a club like Hoffenheim, he's absolutely perfect. He'll go straight into the first 11, straight in that 3-man midfield with a 5-star weak foot and a really good range of stats, particularly in the technical areas, which is of course the most important. Ball control 81, shot power 88, long shots 88. Love that on a 19-year-old. 81 long pass, short pass 77 as well. Like, this guy in the future is just going to be an absolute machine through the middle of the park. And in terms of scoring goals from range as well, there's a good chance he'll have high 90s for long shots and shot power. So you are going to cannon in loads of goals from distance with this guy. Definitely worth signing. Again, you would have to spend a few million over his valuation like we did, but still someone I'd recommend for any career mode team, and especially for Hoffenheim. Now, the one final piece of business I did was I sold this centre-back here, Ermin Bierkakik, I can't pronounce that name very well, to Leverkusen for his valuation, which was £5 million. Didn't need to sell him. Pretty decent centre-back. Starts off 76 rated, was 77 at this point in the game. But with Hoffenheim already having 4 decent centre-backs, he's the 5th one, and of course there is a 6th one who's really poor, and we sell him on deadline day for a very cheap transfer. You don't really need this guy, even though they do play free at the back. So if you want to keep him for squad depth and cover, that's totally fine. You don't have to sell him, but I decided to, and then reinvest the money I got for selling him and a little bit of extra cash we had left over anyway, in a new centre-back, and that is Issa Diop of Toulouse, a 19-year-old centre-back, 6'4", valued at £6 million, starts off 76 rated. I didn't have his full range of attributes and Mars, sadly, as I left the scouting a bit too late. But this youngster is a really, really great young talent, one of the best young centre-backs you can buy. He does start off 76 overall, so the same as the centre-back we just sold to Leverkusen, but he has 87 potential, so grows 10 more ratings than the centre-back we just sold, the Bosnian, to Leverkusen there. He's a much better younger talent, of course, on lower wages as well, and certainly someone I would say that you can either throw straight in the first 11 in the first season, or you can gradually bleed him into the first team. But there is no doubt this guy will be at the heart of your defence alongside Nicholas Saul as the years go on. And if you do change to a 4 at the back and just have 2 centre-backs as opposed to 3, you'd have 2 absolute giant aerial threats, 6'4", 6'5", in Diop and Saul at the back. Very, very strong centre-backs. That'll be one hell of a CB duo. I mean, honestly, Diop and Saul, they will be young beasts and will turn into future monsters. So Diop, certainly a player I would recommend signing if you have the money left over. If you don't, that's totally fine. Or if you just want to keep the Bosnian here for an extra year, that's totally fine as well. But if you want to gamble it and try and sign him, then it's worth doing. We put in a £7.25 million bid, which was eventually accepted. This was the 3rd bid I put in, I think, and I was also running it really thin on deadline day as well, as I had very little money left over after this. But yeah, Posh went to Galway United in Ireland, and we did indeed sign Diop for £7.25 million, which again is £1.25 million over his valuation right now. So he's not really necessary with Hoffenheim having 5 really good centre-backs to begin with. This is just if you want to do it. If you want to sell one of those centre-backs now and get this guy in, then that's certainly something I would recommend. But if you'd rather stick with the experience in the first season and not worry about this guy possibly saying no or not getting a bit accepted, it represents true value for money in the first season, then you don't have to. It's up to you, basically. It's up to you. But I did sign Diop anyway for £7.25 million, a 20 grand a week contract on a 5-year deal. And again, he is going to turn into an absolute monster. Already right now, he has low 80s for strength and jumping. And at just 19 years old, 87 potential, this guy is going to have some unbelievable stats come the end of his growth. When he's peaked, he's just going to be a complete monster and just too much of a beast to outmuscle, really. He will just be absolutely fantastic. And already his defensive stats too, very, very good. Marking 76, slide tackle 79, heading 72, but stand tackle 77 as well. So certainly a player I would recommend. So in the end, we spent £37.25 million on 3 players and raised just shy of 14 million for the sales. So a very expensive window, 20 million over our initial budget was spent. But of course, the reason we were able to raise so much money was through sales initially, but also the constant adjustment between the wage budget and the transfer budget due to selling on some players that you see here in the transfer history that are on high contracts that didn't really represent true value for money, and then bringing in players who are going to replace them on less money. It just makes sense to do it that way, and that's why when you manage a team like this, always remember that in the first season you don't really have to do that much with the squad. It's a decent team, and you just make minor adjustments here and there. You can also reshape your salary structure for years to come, which looks a lot better in representing true value for money with better players, or I should say better players for the future, on cheaper wages than the players they are going to go ahead and replace. So in the end, we simulated to the end of the season as we normally do to see how Hoffenheim would get on. A reminder, they were supposed to finish in mid-table and reached around a 32 in the Deutsche Pokal. Well, they did finish in mid-table in the Bundesliga, but I must say this was a really surprising season for me. I looked at that Hoffenheim team and I thought it's good. There's a lack of depth to it, but it's still pretty decent. We should do alright. We finished in 11th place with 11 wins, 11 draws, 47 scored and 46 conceded, which I thought was really interesting. Very, I mean, that is truly mid-table, right? And they finished in the round of 16 in the Cup, going one stage further than they were supposed to do. So I wouldn't really call it much of a success in the first season. This was probably one of the more disappointing Who Decide for episodes I've made, because sometimes my teams exceed the objectives and I'm really, really pleased about that. Sometimes they do fall short, but this one was a real surprise. I genuinely thought as though they would possibly be qualifying for the Europa League and possibly, like in real life, having an outside shot of finishing in the top 4. To finish in 11th with as many defeats as wins, that was a real surprise to me. But would I change the signings I made? Absolutely not, because here's the thing. In the first season, you're not supposed to qualify for the Europa League. You're not supposed to finish in the top 4 like in real life. You're just supposed to finish in mid-table, and finishing in 11th meets that objective. So whilst I would personally consider the first season a bit of a failure domestically, the board would still consider okay to keep you on for the next year, because you still technically achieved that league objective. And again, with the players coming in, Tielemans 90 potential, Diop 87 potential, Grimaldo 87 potential, adding to some of the young talent you have here already, such as Nicholas Saul, this is a very, very good youthful team, and I would definitely recommend this team for a career mode next year when they are in the Champions League. If you want to have a go already in FIFA 17, maybe put them in the Champions League, definitely worth a go. This is a youthful team. It's young, it's fun, it's in a top 5 European league in the Bundesliga. it is certainly one I'd recommend. They are a team on the rise with a lot of decent young talent, and I would say this will be a really fun team to use in career mode, and I really do hope, fingers crossed, that next year they get the Rhein-Neckar Arena, the real stadium, in the game. That would be fantastic to mark their first ever year in the Champions League. But again, certainly a team I'd recommend. They are built for a career mode with some decent young talent, a good base layer. All you got to do is take over, make a few adjustments, and then start gradually transitioning the team to turning into a really good one that hopefully could compete with Bayern in the years domestically and in Europe as well. But that will end today's episode of you to sign for, guys. So I really hope you have enjoyed it. If you did appreciate the tips, then please do consider leaving a like. Much love to you. Have a fantastic, wonderful day, and I shall see you for the next episode of Who to Sign For very soon. Bye.